So now let's think about language. This goes hand in hand with our thinking. So what is language? Well, language is not just our spoken and written language that we have, but it's also our gestured word. So this would include sign language and any hand gestures that we might do. It's the way we communicate meaning to ourselves as well as to others. There is a certain structure that we have that all languages, no matter what language you're doing, has. And we're going to break it down. The first is a phoneme. A phoneme is the smallest sound unit in a spoken language. For example, bat has 3 phonemes. B, at. Okay, this is like those sounds that you are hearing when you are creating a word. Chat also has 3 phonemes. Ch, at, 3 sounds, right? Those are phonemes. Morphemes, on the other hand, are the smallest unit that carries meaning. This can be a whole word like milk, right? Or it can be part of a word like unforgettable. Unforgettable. Okay, now not table. In this case, it's not table. But yeah, so those are morphemes. They carry meaning. Okay, so how many of these do we have? Well, phonemes, we have about 40 basic sounds. We learn these very early on in our language and when we're learning to spell. Morphemes are those smallest meaningful units. We have about 100,000. For example, like un, for, ed, like that ed sound, er. Words, these are meaningful units. We have about a little under 300,000, at least in our language. Our phrases, we can compose 2 or more words. We have about 326,000. So like a meat eater is a phrase, right? And then sentences. We have infinite number of possibilities to make sentences where we can put many words or phrases together. Grammar is a system of rules in language that enables us to communicate with and understand others. So we have 2 parts of grammar. We have our semantics and we have our syntax. Grammar isn't just our punctuation marks and our quotation and those kind of things. Grammar is about meaning, right? It allows us to really communicate and get our ideas across. Semantics are the rules in which we get meaning from morphemes, words, and sentences. For example, we know that adding ed to the word laugh means that it happened in the past. That's a semantic. That's a meaning or a rule that we are given in our language, right? So ed, in this case, is a morpheme because it changes the meaning of the word it is added to. The rule says that adding ed makes a word past tense. Okay, so that's a semantic rule. It changes the meaning or allows us to have meaning. Syntax is our rules for combining words. Okay, so combining words into logical sentences. For example, in English, our syntactical rule is that adjectives come before nouns. White horse, red hat, blue pony, right? We know that in order to make it logical, in order for us to make sense, the adjective needs to come first. We wouldn't say house white and understand that that house is white. It just doesn't work. However, in Spanish, it's reversed, right? Casablanca for White House. So how do we develop language? Well, we learn our language much before we can learn like math. By the age of, about after the age of 1, we learn on average about 3,500 words per year. We have over 60,000 words by the time that we graduate high school. And this number can be increased dramatically by increasing our reading and increasing our communication with other people. So the stages that we learn language are all pretty much the same throughout different cultures. Our first stage begins at about 4 months old, and this is our babbling stage. This is just sounds. babbling is not imitating adult speech. Okay, so we are not getting, like, they are not trying to imitate what we are saying. They are merely just making sounds because their body can. About 9 or 10 months, now we can determine what the native language of the baby's household is. But before this, all babies, no matter what language they speak or their family speaks at home, they babble the same. Okay? The next stage is our one word stage. At about 1 year old, a child starts to speak that one word. And usually the family can understand them. So like the word dog or doggy may mean, oh, look, there's a dog over there, right? Usually these words, these first words, begin with consonants. B, D, M, P, T, those hard consonant sounds. Most of them are going to be B or Ds. That's why many children, their first word is dad or da. However, at this age, children can already understand quite a bit of language that they hear. They're going to be able to really distinguish what someone is saying and what they want you to do before they can even start speaking. The next stage that we have is the two-word stage. We also call this the telegraphic speech because when we would have telegraphs to send out to people, when that's how we communicated, you would want to make them as short as possible to convey meaning because you paid per word. So about at the second year, a little bit before, the child starts to speak in these two-word sentences. Go car, mama milk. Those are going to be the types of words that get put together and they mean something. Usually moms and dads can get what they mean. So go car means I would like to go in the car. Mama milk means mom, get me some milk. I'm thirsty, right? After this, we have our longer phrases. After telegraphic speech, we start getting 3 or 4, sometimes longer phrases. That makes some syntactical sense. And by that early elementary school age, they're able to really understand humor. So like this joke here, you never starve in the desert because all of the sand which is there. Okay, like they get that sandwiches and sandwich is, like, that's ironic, or I don't think ironic is the right word, but that's funny, right? That's humorous, that we've made sense. They understand that words put together in a certain way can mean different things. So how do we learn? There are a couple of different theories of how we learn. Skinner believes that we learn through operant conditioning, right? He used the idea with rewards and punishments and reinforcements. And so he believed that we associate, we imitate, we reinforce because we've been rewarded for making sounds that are close to adult speech. We learn words by being rewarded from adults, by them paying attention to us or by giving us praise. And so that's how he believed that we learn language. It was all based on these operant conditioning principles that we've already learned. Chomsky, on the other hand, he said that we learn language so fast that we can't say that language is learned through operant conditioning because it would take too long. Conditioning takes a long time for kids to get. So he believed that most of our language was inborn, innate. He supports this idea that language has a universal grammar. There are some underlying structures that are the same throughout every single language. And what he believed is that we're all born with this language acquisition device in our brains that's already there. And once we are exposed to language in our environment, it flips on. So like it's there when we're born, and then the switch is turned on when we start to get exposed to language. Okay, so he kind of believed that this came naturally to humans. This goes along with the idea of a critical period. Okay, so before our first birthday, our brains are discerning word breaks. Okay, so they are statistically breaking down and analyzing which syllables go together. So when we hear the word happy baby, they can determine that happy and baby go together as words. We're able to do that well before our first birthday. And so what this tells us is that language has a critical period. Critical periods are the idea that if we are not exposed to language, if we don't learn language before or during this critical period, we will never learn language. Okay, so for language, our critical period is about 7 years old, and so if we are not exposed to language or language rules before that age, we will not learn language to the point of other people. That's the idea of a critical period. So, which came first, chicken or the egg, right? Does language influence our thinking, or does thinking influence how we speak, our language? Well, Worf believed that language influences our thinking. He believed in linguistic determinism. Basically, this is the idea that the language that we speak determines the way we think about and perceive the world. For example, there is a group of people called the Hopi, and he noticed that the Hopi do not have past tense verbs. So he believed that Hopis could not think about the past. This is the idea of linguistic determinism. Okay, so if you do not have a past tense, you cannot think about things that happened before because our language doesn't allow for that. Same thing goes for our language providing words for objects and events. We can think about these objects more clearly and remember them more clearly because we have words for them. So for example, it's easier to think about a man being a police officer than a woman because we've called it a policeman. Okay? So it's harder for us to comprehend the possibility of a woman filling that role because of the word policeman. However, we know that that's not the only thing, right? We know that people who don't have words for past tense don't think about the past. Like, we know that they still think about the past. So we know that a large extent of our thinking is language-based. However, some of our thinking is in images. Some of it doesn't need any language whatsoever. For example, when you're going to kick a ball into a goal, you do not have to think about the words that you need to do that, right? You are thinking about the motions, the images, the what you need to do to get there. When you bake your favorite cookies, you don't necessarily need language to do that, okay? So this tells us that imagining physical activities activate the same brain regions as when we actually perform the activity, much like a mirror neuron, right? So that tells us that our thoughts influence our language. So most psychologists believe that neither one came first, right? Our thinking influences our language, and our language influences our thinking.